Welcome the rare gems. Solitude is not the absence of company, but the presence of self. May Sarton. Most people assume that choosing to be alone means something is wrong with you, that you're lonely, bitter, or incapable of fitting in. But for a Sigma female, solitude is not a problem to be fixed. It's a decision rooted in clarity, self-respect, and an unshakable sense of self. You don't walk alone because you have no choice. You walk alone because the world is loud, shallow, and exhausting. You see through the empty conversations, the hidden agendas, the forced expectations. While others waste energy trying to fit in, you've realized something deeper. True strength comes from being at peace with yourself, not from seeking validation from people who don't even understand you. Most people live in fear of being alone, but not you. You've made solitude your sanctuary, your training ground, your power source. And because of that, you are unbreakable. Never let anyone make you feel like your independence is a weakness. It's what separates you from the rest. This is the truth no one tells you. The more you embrace your solitude, the stronger, wiser, and more unstoppable you become. Let's explore 10 reasons why Sigma females chose to be alone. Number 1. They are their own source of fulfillment. Most people live their lives waiting for love to complete them, waiting for society to approve of them, waiting for someone to tell them they're good enough. But a Sigma female, she waits for no one. Her sense of fulfillment doesn't come from a relationship, a job title, or the applause of strangers. It comes from within. She understands that if she relies on the world to give her worth, the world can just as easily take it away. So, instead of chasing validation, she builds herself. She sharpens her mind, strengthens her discipline, and deepens her understanding of the world. While others look for happiness in fleeting things, she finds it in mastery of herself, her emotions, and her craft. This kind of self-sufficiency makes people uncomfortable. Why? Because most are used to control. Society teaches women to be dependent, to seek security in relationships, approval in social circles, and purpose in serving others. But a Sigma female doesn't play by those rules. She doesn't need permission to live on her terms, and that makes her dangerous to those who thrive on power games. They can't manipulate her with attention, they can't trap her with promises, and they certainly can't break her by withholding affection. She is whole before anyone enters her life, and she will remain whole if they leave. This terrifies those who expect women to cling, to compromise, to crave connection at any cost. Instead, the Sigma female walks away the moment a situation demands she sacrifice herself. The world is filled with people searching for something outside themselves to make them feel worthy. The Sigma female, she's already found it, within, and that's why she stands apart, untouched and unstoppable. Number 2. They refuse to be emotionally available on demand. There's an unspoken expectation that women should always be emotionally available, ready to listen, to comfort, to care, no matter how exhausted they feel. Society glorifies the selfless woman, the one who carries everyone's burdens without complaint. But a Sigma female, she sees right through that trap. She's not an emotional vending machine, dispensing support every time someone pushes a button. She doesn't exist to be a safe space for people who never bother to check if she is okay. If she feels drained, overwhelmed, or simply uninterested, she withdraws, without guilt, without explanation. This refusal to be emotionally at everyone's disposal confuses and frustrates people. They expect her to always pick up the phone, always listen to their problems, always be the one who gives. But she knows the truth. Constantly giving without recharging leads to burnout, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. She refuses to be a martyr for people who take her kindness for granted. Some call her distant, cold, or even selfish. But let's be real. Who benefits from a woman who gives and gives until there's nothing left of her? Not her. Only the people who were taking advantage in the first place. Sigma females understand that their energy is sacred. They don't waste it on people who only show up when they need something. If she steps back, it's not because she's cruel. It's because she values herself enough to protect her mental and emotional well-being. If that makes her hard to reach or too independent, so be it. She would rather be misunderstood than be emotionally drained for the sake of keeping others comfortable. At the end of the day, the Sigma female sets the terms for her emotional availability. And if someone can't handle that, they were never worthy of her energy in the first place. Number 3, they can't unsee the patterns of human behavior. Once you start recognizing patterns in people, there's no going back. It's like seeing behind the curtain. Suddenly every lie, every manipulation, every predictable move is laid bare. Sigma females have this ability. They see the cycles that others ignore, the red flags most choose to overlook, and once they see them, they can't unsee them. They've watched how people pretend to change only to fall back into old habits. They've seen how apologies are often just damage control, not real remorse. They know how certain people love bomb, gaslight, and manipulate, always expecting another chance. The average person might fall for the same trick twice, maybe even 3 times. A Sigma female? Once is enough. This awareness makes it impossible for them to stay in situations that others tolerate. When they see someone playing mind games, they don't argue. They don't beg for honesty. They exit. They don't waste time hoping someone will change when the patterns prove otherwise. And this is what confuses people. Society teaches women to give endless chances, to be patient, to stick around just in case. But a Sigma female refuses to play along. Her ability to recognize patterns also makes her a natural observer. In social settings, she notices when people act differently around certain individuals. She picks up on the subtle shifts in tone, the forced laughter, the underlying insecurities. She understands human behavior so deeply that most interactions feel predictable. And because of this, socializing can feel more like watching a rerun than an engaging experience. This is why Sigma females often choose solitude, not because they can't connect with people, but because they already know how most stories end. Instead of exhausting themselves in repetitive cycles, they remove themselves from the equation entirely. And while others wonder why they walked away, the Sigma female already knows, because she saw it coming long before they did. Number 4. They'd rather be misunderstood than waste energy explaining themselves. Most people can't wrap their heads around a woman who genuinely enjoys being alone. They assume she must be lonely, bitter, or socially awkward, because in their minds, why else would she choose solitude over companionship? But a Sigma female, she doesn't waste time correcting these assumptions. Let people think what they want. She simply doesn't care to explain herself. Society teaches women to justify their choices, to soften their independence so it doesn't make others uncomfortable. A Sigma female refuses to play that game. She has no interest in proving why she doesn't crave constant attention, why she doesn't tolerate surface-level friendships, or why she'd rather spend a quiet evening alone than force herself into draining social settings. She understands a fundamental truth. Those who get it don't need an explanation. Those who don't never will. So why waste energy? Why try to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding her? She knows that people will believe whatever suits their own perspective. If they need to label her as cold or arrogant just to make sense of her, that's their business, not hers. This refusal to explain herself frustrates people. They expect her to defend her choices, to prove that she's not missing out. But a Sigma female has nothing to prove. She doesn't need validation, she doesn't seek approval, and she certainly doesn't owe anyone an explanation for how she chooses to live. So she lets them talk. She lets them assume. Meanwhile, she continues living exactly as she pleases, free from the burden of unnecessary explanations, free from the exhausting need to be understood, and most importantly, free from the opinions of those who were never meant to understand her in the first place. Number 5. Most friendships feel like a one-sided investment. Friendship, in theory, is supposed to be a two-way street, mutual effort, mutual care, mutual support. But Sigma females have learned the hard way that for most people it's just a transaction. They are natural problem solvers, deep thinkers, and excellent listeners, which makes them a magnet for people who want to unload their problems. And at first, they give, they listen, they help, they show up. But over time, a pattern emerges. People only reach out when they need something. When a Sigma female stops initiating, stops checking in, or stops offering emotional support, something interesting happens. The relationship doesn't deepen, It doesn't even stay the same, it simply fades, like it never existed in the first place. That's when reality sets in. It was never a friendship. It was just a convenience. This realization isn't just disappointing, it's exhausting. It's why Sigma females don't waste time maintaining one-sided connections. They don't entertain relationships where they're the only ones making an effort. They don't keep people around just to avoid being alone. If a friendship only exists because they are putting in all the work, then it's not a real friendship. It's an illusion. And Sigma females don't believe in keeping up illusions, so they cut it early. No long explanations, no dramatic goodbyes, just distance. And that's where people start to notice. The moment a Sigma female stops giving, stops carrying the weight of the relationship, it collapses under its own emptiness. That's proof enough that it was never built on real connection, only on what she could provide. Most people fear losing friends, so they tolerate one-sided dynamics just to keep people around. But a Sigma female would rather be alone than be surrounded by people who only value her when it benefits them. And that's what makes her different. She doesn't cling to what's hollow. She lets it go, knowing that true connection is never something she has to beg for. Number 6. They've made peace with themselves. Most people can't stand to be alone. They fill every silence with noise, every empty space with distractions, and every quiet moment with someone else's presence. Why? Because deep down they don't actually like themselves. They fear their own thoughts, their own emotions, their own reflection. But Sigma females, they're the opposite. They don't run from themselves, they run toward themselves. While others avoid their inner world, Sigma females dive deep. They've done the work. They've confronted their past, faced their insecurities, and sat with their own pain instead of numbing it. And in doing so, they've built something most people never will: self-acceptance. They don't need constant validation because they validate themselves. They don't crave external distractions because their inner world is rich enough. And they don't fear solitude because to them, solitude isn't loneliness, it's home. This level of self-sufficiency confuses people. Society is built on the idea that we should constantly seek something, whether it's love, approval, or a sense of belonging. But a Sigma female doesn't operate on that system. She doesn't chase. She doesn't beg. She doesn't mold herself to be more likable. She simply is. And that kind of presence is rare. Some might call it detachment, others might see it as arrogance, but the truth is, it's freedom. When you make peace with yourself, you stop needing people to fill a void. You stop clinging to relationships that don't serve you. And you stop fearing solitude because you realize that the best company you'll ever have is the person staring back at you in the mirror. Sigma females understand this. They've walked through their own darkness and come out stronger. They don't just tolerate being alone, they thrive in it. And that's why they don't settle. For them, solitude isn't a punishment, it's a choice, a power move, and most of all, it's peace. Number 7. They see that most relationships are built on control. Most people don't realize it, but relationships, whether friendships, family bonds, or romance, are rarely built on pure connection. There's always an unspoken expectation, an invisible obligation, or a subtle power dynamic at play. And Sigma females, they see it all too clearly. They notice how friendships often come with silent rules: be available when needed, agree even when you don't, and never outgrow the version of you that others are comfortable with. They recognize how family ties can sometimes be more about duty than genuine love, where guilt is used as a leash and independence is seen as rebellion. And they've watched how romantic relationships often become a struggle for control, where one person dictates how much space, freedom, or ambition the other is allowed to have. Sigma females don't just reject this. They walk away from it completely. They refuse to live under anyone's thumb, be molded into someone's expectation, or shrink themselves to keep others comfortable. And because of this, they are often labeled as distant, difficult, or even unloving. But that's the price of choosing freedom over forced connections. They would rather stand alone than be in relationships that come with invisible chains. They don't do emotional debt, where love, kindness, or time is given with the expectation of something in return. They don't tolerate guilt tactics, where people try to manipulate them into staying small, staying quiet, or staying dependent. Instead, they choose peace. They choose relationships that are built on mutual respect, not obligation. They choose connections that feel light, not heavy. And if those are rare, they're fine with that. Because the last thing a Sigma female will ever do is trade her autonomy for a relationship that feels like a cage. People can call it cold, call it distant, call it whatever they want. But the truth is, it's just self-respect. And a Sigma female will never apologize for that. Number 8. They've lost faith in reciprocity. There was a time when Sigma females believed in fairness, that if they gave, they would receive. That if they listened, others would listen back. That if they were there for people, those same people would return the favor. But experience has taught them a brutal truth. Most people take far more than they give. They've been the shoulder to cry on, the reliable friend, the one who shows up when no one else does. They've poured time, energy, and emotional support into others, thinking that one day, when they needed it, the favor would be returned. But when that moment came, silence, excuses, absence. And after experiencing this pattern enough times, they stop hoping for things to be different. They stop waiting. They stop expecting. But here's the difference between a Sigma female and someone who becomes bitter. She doesn't waste time complaining about it. She doesn't throw pity parties or play the victim. She simply adjusts. She learns her lesson, adapts, and moves differently. She no longer expects people to pour into her the way she pours into them. Instead, she becomes her own source of strength. This shift changes everything. She stops overgiving. She stops making herself available to people who only remember her when it's convenient. She stops chasing reciprocity in a world that rarely gives it. And while this might make her seem distant or detached, it's actually the smartest move she can make. She's not bitter, she's just done wasting her energy. She knows that real connections are rare, that most relationships are built on convenience, and that self-reliance is the only way to avoid disappointment. So she chooses solitude over one-sided friendships. She chooses inner strength over false expectations, and most of all, she chooses herself. Because in a world where people take without thinking, a Sigma female stands apart. She gives where it matters, but never at the expense of herself. Number 9. They protect their peace like it's sacred. For most people, peace is an afterthought, something they hope to find in between chaos, distractions, and unnecessary drama. But for a Sigma female, peace is non-negotiable. It's her foundation, her safe space, her top priority, and she will do whatever it takes to protect it. She doesn't tolerate toxic people, messy situations, or energy-draining conversations. The moment someone disrupts her mental clarity, she doesn't argue, explain, or beg for change. She simply walks away. No hesitation, no second chances. She's not in the business of fixing people who refuse to fix themselves. She doesn't get caught up in unnecessary conflict, mind games, or emotional blackmail. If someone thrives on chaos, they are not welcome in her world. This mindset often isolates her. She loses friends, distances herself from family, and refuses to entertain relationships that feel like a battlefield. To outsiders, it may seem like she's difficult, unapproachable, or even ruthless. But in reality, she just understands the cost of allowing the wrong people into her life. She has learned, sometimes painfully, that peace is something you choose, not something you wait for. And that choice requires cutting out anything or anyone that threatens it. While others tolerate dysfunction in the name of loyalty or love, a Sigma female refuses to sacrifice her well-being. She would rather walk alone in silence than be surrounded by people who drain her. She doesn't crave validation, she doesn't seek approval, and she certainly doesn't fear solitude. She has built a world where her mind is at ease, and she won't let anyone disturb that. And if that means being misunderstood, so be it. If that means losing people, she welcomes it. Because to a Sigma female, peace isn't just important, it's sacred. Number 10. They understand that not everyone deserves access to them. Most people hand out their time and energy like free samples, hoping for approval, afraid of being alone, or simply because they don't know their own worth. Sigma females, They don't operate that way. They treat access to their life as a privilege, not a right. And if someone hasn't earned that privilege, they don't get it. Simple as that. A Sigma female understands that energy is a finite resource. Every conversation, every interaction, every moment spent with someone is an investment, and she refuses to invest in people who bring nothing of value to her life. She's not interested in fake friendships, shallow connections, or relationships built on convenience. She doesn't entertain those who drain her, gossip about her, or secretly compete with her. She sees right through them, and instead of engaging, she simply shuts the door. This mindset confuses people. They assume she's cold, distant, or even arrogant. But the truth is, she just has standards. She doesn't believe in giving everyone equal access because not everyone deserves it. She's not available for energy leeches, time wasters, or people who take more than they give. And because of this, her circle is small, sometimes almost non-existent. But that's never a concern for her. She values quality over quantity, peace over popularity, and authenticity over forced connections. She doesn't fear solitude, she embraces it. This is why most people don't understand her. They are used to women who seek validation, who crave belonging, who tolerate nonsense just to keep people around. But a Sigma female? She would rather walk alone than lower her standards. So when someone asks why she's so selective, she doesn't explain. She just smiles. Because those who get it don't need an explanation. And those who don't, they were never meant to have access to her in the first place. The power in walking alone. The world will try to convince you that solitude is a weakness, that a woman who chooses to stand alone must be broken, bitter, or missing something. But here's the truth no one tells you. Walking alone is not a sign of emptiness. It's a sign of wholeness. A Sigma female doesn't choose solitude because she can't find people to be around. She chooses it because she refuses to lower her standards just to fit in. She chooses it because she values her peace more than forced connections. She chooses it because she understands that most relationships come with expectations, obligations, and silent attempts to control who she is. And if the choice is between being owned or being alone, she'll choose herself every time. But let's be clear, solitude doesn't mean isolation. It doesn't mean she's cold, unfeeling, or incapable of love. In fact, she feels deeply, but she just refuses to waste that depth on people who can't meet her there. She would rather wait for something real than entertain something shallow. And if that means walking alone for a while, so be it. Because solitude has given her something most people never find: self-respect. It has sharpened her instincts, protected her peace, and made her immune to the need for external validation. She is not lonely. She is free. So to every Sigma female who has chosen her own path, who has walked away from what no longer serves her, and who refuses to shrink to make others comfortable, keep going. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need permission to live on your terms. The world may not understand you, but that's not your burden to carry. Let them misunderstand you. Let them call you distant. Let them wonder why you don't settle. Because at the end of the day, you don't need the world's approval. You just need you. Thank you for watching the Rare Gems, and God bless you.